Okay, and we're live, everybody. Hello, happy new year, good evening or morning or afternoon or whatever it is for you out in the world. And so let us know, of course, that you can
Oops.
hear me, you can see me in the chat
I
there
hear an echo.
on the right-hand side. Penny, go ahead and mute the YouTube window. Where
Okay.
the chat box is, just mute that, and then
Yeah.
you're all good.
Okay.
So as people are coming in, just again in the chat, let us
Yeah, I'm
know
trying to find that.
that you can hear us. Penny's working out her side of it
Sorry.
here. That's
Hold on a
okay.
second.
Okay. So, hi everybody. How are your projects going? How is the new year happening? And I know we have people from all different climate zones. And so I know that for some of us, we are in the winter, and some of you are in different seasons. Looks like Adam. Hey, Adam, thank you so much for letting us know everything's working well on your end. Awesome. And let me just, let's see, Penny, I muted you for a second. Now I have to figure out how to unmute you. We have a little few technical challenges here that we are just working on. So just give us a sec here while we work that out. I accidentally muted Penny, and now I can't unmute you, Penny. Oh boy. Ooh. Penny, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yep. I
Okay,
think.
there we go.
How's
You're
that?
unmuted. That's it. All right,
Okay.
great. Okay, we are set. I am so excited to be here with you guys in the first expert hangout of the Eco Landscape Mastery School here, 2018. It's January 16th, and we have an amazing year of live expert hangouts that we have set up for you each month, and I'm so honored and excited to have one of my dear friends and mentors with us today to kick off the new year, Penny Livingston. I'm not going to read Penny's bio like folks normally would, because I actually know Penny really well. Penny was really one of the first people that introduced me to permaculture. When I was young, when I was 19, I first got into permaculture. And there's a few people in my life who really took me on, who mentored me, who supported me, and helped me build a career in permaculture. And Penny's foremost of folks who supported me along the way, who created opportunity for me, who mentored me. The very first professional landscape project I was ever on was a project of Penny's, of her landscape company, Sustainable Living Designs. And I always remember that first day, Penny, where you got me down in the ditch on a 106-degree day, digging out a trench that the machine couldn't dig out. That was the conversation. Hey, Eric, you want to come work for me? There was a trench the machine couldn't do, so we need you to do it by hand. And
Yeah, I kind of wanted to see what you were made of, and you proved yourself in spades.
Well, thank you. Well, so that was really, where it started for me. And, Penny has been in the realm of permaculture, of ecological landscaping, of water harvesting, of natural building, of herbal medicine for what, at least 30 years, Penny?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for 30 years, and she's worked in countries all over the planet. She's worked all throughout the United States. She's worked in different climate regions. She's worked on all level of projects, from farms to large scale projects. And so I think that it is just in this time on the planet right now where the need for the solutions to catch and store water, to build soil, to restore our environments, we need to like up the ante on how we work in the world. And Penny has been a model, a pioneer for decades. And so thank you so much for being here with us today, Penny.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So before I just pass it off to Penny, I want to just let you all know just a little bit of housekeeping, that in the chat room here, please ask your questions. I will go over to the Facebook event page where some folks might have asked some questions before. So I'll collect any questions that were asked before, but if you all could ask your questions in the chat, that would be great. And then Penny will get to that as we go. And so Penny, I want to just start us off by just share a little bit more about your work in the ecological landscaping realm. I know you've run your own landscape business, you've run educational organizations, you've worked in a variety of different projects, and what we're really looking for in the program, our students are looking to build careers doing permaculture, ecological landscaping, regenerative design. And so navigating all those social and economic and organizational and design specific pieces to build their own company. So, and anything from your wealth of experience that we should be looking for, any kinds of organizational patterns or anything like that
Yeah, there's a lot to say. I mean, I don't know. Should I share my story of how I got started, or would that be helpful?
Yeah.
But then I can also share a few things about what I've learned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I really started as a gardener. I advertised in our little rural community of Point Reyes Station. I had a ad that said, "Weeds got you down, let me pull them up," and just kind of doing some gardening work. And then once I'd pull up the weeds, which I can talk about in a minute because I don't believe that there are such things as weeds. But then there'd be like, well, what do we put in here now? So then I'd start designing gardens for people on a fairly low key level. That would be just me and maybe one other person that worked for me. And I wasn't really licensed and only took on very small jobs. But I had a textile background, so I used a lot of my design skills from textile design into garden design. One thing that I learned about garden design is that you kind of have to think about the future. You're sort of you have to project yourself into the future, because when you plant a little plant, it's going to grow and change and flower. And so it's not a static art. It's a very dynamic art. And it's a successionary art. So it's pretty exciting that way, and very unpredictable. So finally, a friend of mine who's was a developer said he saw my gardens and he loved them, and he said, "We hate our landscaper. If you get your license, then we can hire you." So first I said, "Nah, I'm not that ambitious." And then I decided, well, I could actually make more money, because you can definitely make much better money if you get licensed. And so I went and studied in the state of California and did my test for my contractor's license. And on my way home from the test, I'm sure I nailed it. I was really well prepared. And I bid on 3 homes for this developer. And at that point, I had to look at the plans that were already done. And I said, these plans are terrible. They're really ugly, but I'm going to do it because I need the job. And so I installed everything as per plan. And then they called me up and they said, "We unanimously agree with you, and we want you to redesign these 3 homes and reinstall the landscapes." And that was sort of my beginning. And so at that point, this is before I was into permaculture, but I was very into native plants and habitat. And I was also into organic. Like, I didn't use chemicals, and I didn't use, pre-emergent herbicides and all that stuff that the industry would use. So that was kind of how I started. And then I started working for a developer, and then did a lot of high-end residential landscaping. And one piece of advice that I learned that I will pass on to all of you if you're working professionally with clients is never cut corners. do it right. Don't try to cut corners and save people money, because whenever I have done that, it has 100% of the time, and I'm not exaggerating, 100% of the time, it has backfired on me. And I, it all fell into my lap. So it's much better to, if they don't want to pay for it, then don't do the job. Stick to your guns and really stick to your integrity and not compromise on the quality of the installation.
Man,
So
that's hugely important advice, because how often do we find ourselves in these situations where you want to make a client happy, right? They've got a project, they have a budget they want to do. Oh, they have this dream and you want to help make the dream come true, but they don't have the budget for it.
Right.
And
well, then start small and don't do the whole project, and do the part of the project that they can afford. That's one thing. And then the other thing is being in a dry lands. And this might be a little controversial, but I love automatic irrigation. And I usually always talk my clients into it, because I can guarantee the landscapes, and I would guarantee my landscapes for 2 years, but they were not guaranteed against neglect, acts of God and the goddess, and animal damage. But otherwise, in terms of the watering and the planting and making sure everything was installed properly and all that, I would guarantee for 2 years.
So would you have that would you have a contract that you would have with your client that had kind of detailed out what your guarantee was, and you both sign on?
Yeah. And, I'm just going to say some things a little controversial, just because, that's fun. But
be the controversy, Penny.
Well, I don't know what people think about this, but I'll just tell you another thing that happened, because I was just getting started and I installed a sprinkler system for somebody. And this is in California, and probably in the 80s or something like that. And I think I charged $600 and installed 4 valves and sprinkler system and a couple of drip systems. And I did it by the hour, but that's how much it cost me. Well, one of the valves failed. So I charged the people, because I was doing time and materials. I was not doing a bid. So I charged the people $40 to go take the valve, drive it about an hour drive. They replaced the valve for free, at this where I buy my supplies. I took the valve back, put it back in, charged them $40, and they never spoke to me again. Next time I did a job similar to that, I charged $1,800. And it's like, guaranteed. Any problem, it's taken care of. They paid the $1,800 and they were happy as a clam. And if anything, I don't think anything happened, but if it had, it would have been replaced basically on their dime. Right. And if it doesn't, and if I do a good job and it doesn't need to be replaced and everything's good for me. And if it does, then good for them, but it's just a funny psychological thing. And this is just doing business. I don't think it's unethical, because contractors should not expect to pay for defective parts and things like that with their time. So they work in a little contingent that if anything goes wrong, it's guaranteed.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
And there's the shared risk and
shared risk. Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to back up a second, because you were telling your story about how you got into it, and you told that story about how you had affected the design of this development, and then got hired. And so I think that one thing that I know some of our students deal with is when you get opportunities, you get projects, they land in your lap. How for you, did you feel scared? Did you have the infrastructure already in place to be able to work with a developer, the invoicing and the bookkeeping and all that stuff, the design chops, or did you kind of have to make it up as you went along? Or how was that for you, navigating that as you're, all of a sudden you have this big project that landed in your lap?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I was making it up as I went along. And there's a little book you can get here where it actually maps out if people are shoveling sand and hauling sand and they're hauling it 100, 200 feet, how much that costs. I had a little book that helped me bid costs because it basically had all these different tasks that they do with landscaping. And it was a little, it was kind of helped me safeguard myself a little bit. But then the other side, you have to be competitive. So when I charged that $1,800, I was actually competitive with any other contractor because that's what everybody does to stay in business. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily scared. I don't remember, but there was some stress around. So where the stress comes from is, I was always worried about if people were going to pay me or not. That was where my biggest stress came, because sometimes people would delay in paying, and it might be because they don't have the money. And I was pretty much hand to mouth. Like, I was a single mother raising 2 children, and you often need the money from the last job to finance the next job. So I was constantly afraid that people wouldn't pay me. And if they didn't like it or something like that, there was definitely that. That never happened, but that was where my fear was. When it came to actually knowing how to install and doing the jobs, I would always get a mentor or hire someone who knew more than I did to work for me to teach me those things if I needed to do things like that, like hardscaping and things like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to bring those mentors on. We have a couple questions. We've got these 2 questions here kind of related. One from Anne. She's asking, do you ever guarantee gardens that you don't maintain after installation? And then the other one from Leo is, do you only use automatic irrigation after planting the garden to give the plants a system to have a good start, or do you have to continue the irrigation later on?
Well, generally, I'm going to use the big what they say is that even for native plants and drought tolerant plants, you need to have good regular irrigation for about 2 years. And so I would they never really called me back, but I can tell a couple of stories where they did, but in general, I wasn't, they would call me if there was a problem. And I would, and they would have up to 2 years. And after 2 years, then it's up to them. I mean, because most irrigation systems, you have to maintain them every year and things like that. And if I did come in and maintain them, I would be paid to do that, to do just general maintenance on irrigation. But I'll tell you one story, because Anne asked about, do I guarantee gardens that I don't maintain? And the answer is yes. But I had this one client who kept turning off the irrigation system, and the shrubs were dying. And I'd come back, they'd call me and say, our shrubs are dying. And I'd run over there and I look, and the irrigation system's off. And I think it was just a habit he had. I don't know, but he turned the irrigation system off. And then he said, oh no, because it was going to rain and la, la, la. He's saying all these things. And I said, don't touch the irrigation system. Just leave it alone. Don't turn it off. And he did it again. And he was kind of expecting me to replace the plants. But I came back and he had turned the irrigation system off again and saying, oh, it was only off for just a little bit, for a week or something like that. And when I went and dug up one of the shrubs, they were bone dry. And, maybe I was a little scrappy when I was younger, or maybe I still am. I don't know. But I just looked at him and I said, you know what? Plants don't lie. Plants don't lie. And those plants were dried out. The irrigation has been probably off for at least a month. And he didn't say anything, and he got a little sheepish, and, he didn't ask me to replace the plants, but the plants don't lie. That's why I love working with them.
Penny, you're still you're still scrappy.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Let's see. Then we have, do you even guarantee gardens that you don't maintain let's see. Do you
Yeah.
even guarantee? I hope it's okay if I chime in as well. Some states require contractors to cover the work you do, but always have a clause in.
Yeah, you can put in certain clauses. That's why I had clauses against neglect. You know, so if they're neglecting their garden, or if they turn the irrigation system off or something like that, it's not guaranteed. I came to one, you know, working for developers, I came to one place after I'd installed the garden, and the painters were pouring, they were cleaning, washing something into the garden. And there were two of them. And I said, what's that you're putting on the soil? And one guy says water, and the other guy says solvent. It's like null and void if the plant dies. But I just happened to catch them, you know. So it's tricky when you're guaranteeing. But to be honest, I mean, I did it for years and years, and for the most part, 9 times out of 10, or almost 9.5 times out of 10, there were no problems. There were just those few little things, like I just told you. Those might have even been the only 2 times that ever, you know, there was a dispute at all. So, but most of the time, if you put it in right and the watering system's right, the plants are going to thrive. And if a gopher eats them, you have a clause against animal damage, or a deer eats them, you have a clause, because you can't predict deer.
Exactly. So, okay, well, let's.
Uh-oh. I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe send me a chat. Can you hear me? And maybe somebody can answer that if you can. And I can. Okay, so okay, great. Okay, well, maybe you can you can send me a question, and I can answer it until Eric gets back on. Yeah, I'll just tell Eric something. Okay, there. Oh yeah, yes. So the question is, can you speak to natural buildings that I incorporate in the garden? And that's a great question. When I first took my first permaculture class and I was trying to integrate all the permaculture principles, part of the story, I'll just tell you that story is kind of fun because it incorporates natural building, is you know, we mulched everything. We planted a bunch of fruit trees. We put in all this mulch, and we had so many slugs and snails that I thought, I don't have a slug and snail problem. I have a duck shortage. So we decided to get ducks to eat the slugs and snails. And then, so we got the ducks, and I don't know if any of you have had ducks, but they do everything in water, and they can make the water really funky. So we had a little tub for the ducks. And then I decided, I'd rather sit by a pond than change duck water. So we dug a pond. And I had been exposed in my first permaculture class. I had seen, I think, the first cob building. Cob is an earthen technique. And if you don't know what cob is, send a chat and we can explain that in a minute. So just let me know and I'll explain what cob is. But I saw my first cob building in Oregon. And so I had all the subsoil from the pond, and I ended up building my office with it. And then, so it became this incredibly awesome, integrated design where, you dig the pond for the ducks, and the ducks eat the bugs in the garden. And then the roof water from the pond, let me start over. I built an office out of the earth from the pond. And then the roof of the office would harvest water that would then fill the pond. And the pond also integrated with the ducks that ate the bugs in the garden. And then it also processed our gray water. I built a little mini marsh. And so the gray water, the laundry and bath water from my house would go in through this little marsh, and that would also keep the pond topped up. I also located it kind of outside of where my office was, so that I could, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because Eric just sent me a message. I located the pond outside of my office so that I could both see the reflection, but it would also mitigate the microclimates. And so around the pond, I planted, peaches and grapes and things that needed more sun reflection. And anyway, so that's one way that I incorporated it, was by digging a pond, creating habitat, harvesting water, and then the soil you can use in natural building projects. And in most of the country, in the US and definitely in other parts of the world, you can build little outbuildings and garden structures and walls and ovens and benches and decorative elements. You could even wire in, make little niches and put in lighting or places for candles, or all kinds of things you can do with landscaping and with natural building. It's an incredible opportunity to do that. So I don't know if that answered your question. So Eric just said his power went off. So, so his electricity went off. So, I'm happy to just take it. And if you have other questions, somebody else said, one more question about the irrigation. 2 years of irrigation seems quite extreme to me because I work in and with plenty of rainfall. Oh yeah. And with what amount of rainfall do you have to work with? Okay, yes. It's so funny because I don't really know who I'm talking to and where all of you are located, but I'm in California, and we have the longest dry season in the world. We have, 8 months, sometimes 6 months minimum, 8 to 9 months maximum of dry season. So we're Mediterranean. We're like being in the Middle East or in Turkey or in parts of Chile, or, so that's why we have to have irrigation. But if you have much more regular rains, if you're in the eastern United States or in a more humid climate, you don't need that. So thank you for saying that. And